All right, everybody, welcome to the first ever episode of CUSA All Access. Dylan Simmons alongside Ryan Martinulich and Matt Hayden, aka Baby Gator, and we cannot wait to bring you today's episode and join us on this journey. It's going to be a fun one. Can't wait to get things started. So, guys, as Cody Rhodes would say, what do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk some Conference USA football?
I feel like it's necessary.
It's CUSA All Access. What do you expect? We're talking about Pac-12.
I'm more of a Big Ten fan myself.
Big Ten. I got to shout out to the American Athletic Conference. No, let's see. Of course, we're talking
Power 6.
What about SEC?
CUSA All Access, baby.
Okay. Let's get into it. All right, so guys, the question that we're asking here: who is the best team in Conference USA right now? Who's performing at a level that all other teams can only dream of having?
I don't want to get into it like that. I feel like it's so early to really put an emphasis on any one team. I'm shocked right now how successful Florida International has been. Already 3-1 this season. True freshman quarterback. They're looking great. But, of course, Liberty right now with Caden Salter and first-year head coach Jamie Chadwell, they are probably right there at the top, cream of the CUSA right now.
I would say FIU, they've been really shocking. I have badgered on them before, but, they've been performing really well. They just got a win over UConn at home. Yeah. That's a big win for them. They've been taking out some pretty good teams. What are they, 2-1 right now? For them, that's a very unusual start. So we have to give them kudos for that. These Panthers might be a little bit dangerous this year, but, only time will tell. But I will say this, New Mexico State, bit of a rebound this week. They won the Rio Grande rivalry against New Mexico. They are starting to gain some momentum. And, of course, they've got a head coach from SIU who's been bringing themselves and bringing them to a higher level. Our good friend Dan Eschenfelder will get that joke, and he'll probably enjoy that.
Yeah, well, Jerry Kill came from Minnesota. Yes,
did.
Technically SIU, but
Go Salukis.
Go Salukis.
We're starting this.
Yes, we're starting this right now. So, okay, moving on past that, though, we talked about New Mexico State. Matt, what about you? What's a team that you think standing out to you at this moment?
Am I going to get kicked off the show if I say WKU? Because I'm going to be completely honest. Yeah, I'm sorry, all fellow Blue Raider fans, but Western Kentucky looks really good. Again, Austin Reed at quarterback has been very, limits his turnovers. His O-line was holding up for him, in the first 2 games. Obviously, when you play Ohio State, and you are, a Conference USA team, it's going to be...
They lost 63-10.
Yeah, but that's probably the best we're going to see. Maybe Liberty could hold up a better battle against Ohio State. But, the Hilltoppers defense, has been able to hold their own. Again, they've been pretty much blowing people out. They blew out USF by, something that Alabama couldn't do. They blew out, USF by almost 20 points. And then Houston Christian, again, Bailey Zappi, they have some connection there. But, again, WKU's looked like a really good team. So I guess I'd put them up there next to Liberty. I feel like they're 1-2 in the conference personally. Unfortunately, if I had to make predictions here, I think WKU might have the 100 Miles of Hate won this year. Just giving you a future prediction because they're a pretty good team. But MTSU, again, we beat Miami last year, so anything can happen. So, but yeah, I gotta give WKU its flowers.
You had to bring up Miami, of course, didn't you? You know what? I want to talk a little bit about Liberty because, my gosh, this team, they are for real. Salter, their quarterback, the dude's astounding. This is a stud, a superstar in the making. I love what he's done so far. He is the CUSA Offensive Player of the Week, as we'll get into a little bit later. But the guy had 344 passing yards, 6 total touchdowns against Buffalo, a team that, I thought could challenge them in certain ways. Not even a contest. They put up 55 points. 55 points. How is that even possible? I don't know. They did it. This Liberty team, to me, is the team to beat in Conference USA right now. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Maybe Western Kentucky can challenge them, but I just can't get past the 63 points they gave up.
Well, so 2 things. Of course, Caden Salter has improved under Chadwell's system.
Yes.
He's a former 4-star. He was actually a former Tennessee Vol before he got to Liberty. I will say, I think a lot of people expected the way Ohio State's offense has performed through 2 games, that Western Kentucky would definitely keep it close. Kyle McCord struggled. All of a sudden, he threw, 5 touchdowns that game?
Yeah.
It was almost an immaculate game
because
for the
Ohio
quarterback.
State had been struggling a lot. They only put up 35 against Youngstown. All of a sudden, McCord just goes off in this game.
175-yard bomb to Marvin Harrison Jr. So they look like a complete team. I don't want to say that the Hilltoppers aren't a top team in CUSA, but that certainly did raise a few questions on their defense. I will say Austin Reed is still a heck of a player. He is definitely going to lead the Hilltoppers to success and will probably wind up being, a mid-range quarterback coming in the NFL draft next year. But like I said, it's so tough to tell. I like Liberty. I don't want to, like I said, put all my chips on Florida International because, strength of schedule is kind of weak. But 3 wins, already impressive. They're trying to get to become bowl eligible first time in 5 years. Trying to have their first winning season in 6.
Yep.
So, like I said, very early to tell, but I do like the way Liberty and Florida International are playing.
Well, here's the current conference standings right now. So Liberty's on top, of course, with a 3-0, 1-0 record in conference. Now, most of these teams haven't, or at least most of them have played one game so far. In fact, there's only a couple teams that haven't played a conference game, Middle Tennessee and Sam Houston. So we'll learn a little bit more about those teams, especially this weekend, with their opponents. Middle Tennessee, of course, taking on Colorado State, which, just had the whole excursion out in Boulder against Deion Sanders and the prime time Colorado Buffaloes. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch. But, I mean, looking at the current standings, you got Jacksonville State, also 1-0 in conference. Louisiana Tech, 1-0 in conference. That's a team that, has shocked me a little bit. I mean, they've gotten a better start than I thought they would, considering that they were a little bit tepid last season. So, I mean, the race is wide open, from what I can tell.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Sonny Cumbie's done a great job in his second year already. Transfer quarterback, Boise State, Hank Bachmeyer coming in, really kind of energizing the offense. Like I said, it's tough to tell with the standings once again. Like you said, a few teams still haven't played. We're going to see a lot of action over the weekend, really kind of show where teams are at as we kind of hit that our first kind of checkpoint, our third way through the season.
Yeah.
I'm a little stunned about Sam Houston. I tell you, they'd probably be a top contender if they could find a way to score, because that is a legit defense right there with the Bearcats. And they got a team in Houston that's kind of also been, as you've mentioned, kind of tepid this season. Lost Clayton Tune to the draft.
They
Offense
did.
has kind of been stagnant. So I think 2 Texas teams right there we're going to learn a lot about. So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Sam Houston. I mean, Matt, they've scored 3 points all season. They got shut out by BYU, by way of Big 12 BYU. I still can't get past that. Conference realignment has got me all messed up. But against Air Force, 3 points. I mean, if their defense hasn't played bad, they've only given up 27 points all year. But, Matt, when you have that kind of offense, it's like you can't score. And Alabama knows a thing or two about that with what they just did against USF. So you're well aware.
Yeah, well, Alabama doesn't know who's their starting quarterback. They say it's Milroe. But back to, again, Sam Houston, again, CUSA All Access here. Sam Houston, yeah, their defense, man, it astonishes me some days. I'm just like, man, just if they score 2 touchdowns, they could obviously be 2-0 and look very potent. Because, I mean, they've held, like you said, 27 total points in their first 2 games. And, yes, it is very scary that you've only scored 3 points. But, if you can just get a little bit of offense. I'm not saying you have to be, top of the conference, or even if you could be a middle-of-the-pack offensive team and your defense holds up like it's been having, Sam Houston could mess around, once this conference play, starts to occur, they could steal some games here and there and put their name in the hat as, top of the CUSA. But again, you got to score to win. You can't just, can't be 0-0 victories. You actually have to put points on the board. So if you're Sam Houston, you just got to find something. Your defense is doing great, and if you want to, again, you got to score to win. Plain and simple. Ain't nothing too special about it.
I mean, you got to score to win. That's the key of the game. As what was his name? Herm Edwards would say, you play to win the game. You got to score to win the game. But looking into this now, so I want to take a look at the players of the week that we just had, because we had some interesting players. We talked about Salter already, great player, but Middle Tennessee's got a stud guys on defense. Did you guys see Brumfield against Murray State? Yeah. I mean, there was this one moment, because I was in the press box watching this. He comes over, he hits the Murray State running back, I think. The ball popped straight in the air.
Yeah.
It went like 20 feet in the air. I've never seen anything like that before. It blew my mind. And he's, I think, second in the nation forced fumbles. Like, that's crazy. This guy is going to be a real stud for Middle Tennessee. And also, shout out to New Mexico State's kicker, Albertson. Ethan Albertson, that is. He had 2 field goals, including one to help put that game away against New Mexico, get that upset. So good on him. But, on the topic of that, I mean, who are some players right now that you guys think are going to stand out for CUSA or are already standing out?
Obviously, Tyrese Knight at UTEP. I mean, that linebacker right there. He's already had a great season last year, and he's just improving on it. Great speed up the gut on blitzes. He's covering running backs, tight ends, receivers. He's always the first one there to make a play on the ball. And he's just impressed me so far. I mean, 2.5 sacks on the season. I think second in CUSA. He's going to have an exceptional year this year.
I'd have to agree with that one. Matt, what about you? I mean, what do you think in terms of like good CUSA players that are making an impact right now?
So yeah, I mean, definitely Rice. Knight's been killer. He's been all over the field, just playing that great. Being the leader of the team. He's been there for 4 years, so he knows the defense in and out. But I got to give props again. FIU has been killing it to Shamari Lawrence, the running back, sophomore. Him and Keyshawn Owens have been kind of splitting carries here and there, kind of like a little Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott type deal. They both have been very potent. I mean, Shamari took the first couple of games, but Keyshawn Owens was just named conference player or offensive player last week. And so, again, those two running backs can be some crucial here in, CUSA, and definitely could be some ground and pound, down in, Miami for, FIU. So those are two players to look forward to on the offensive side of the ball. But, here, at MTSU, Vadiato has looked pretty solid. I mean, again, you're playing against Alabama, your first game starting, never an easy choice.
Never.
But he looked very poised. He looked very confident in the pocket. Wasn't, wasn't making sporadic throws, wasn't causing, just throwing the ball up there and praying for anything. He was playing a very clean style of football. And you just got to take, when you're playing against a team like Alabama and, again, MTSU, that game was meant for them just to see what they have and, try to find the bright spots. And, Vadiato played, again, I think he had maybe an interception?
I think he had one, yes.
Just 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, nearly 300 yards passing.
So, again, against a Nick Saban-led Alabama team. Now, I get Alabama is not as good as they have been in years past, but Alabama is still Alabama. You still went to Tuscaloosa, and you still played a solid game. And so, I mean, you got to take wins where you can. The scoreboard might not, project a win in the win column, but again, you take your victories where you can. And if you're MTSU, I'd be very happy at the performance I've been seeing out of Vadiato lately.
Well, I already talked about Brumfield, but I got to say, the guy, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but he reminds me almost of a Middle Tennessee version of Luke Kuechly in a way. I kind of like that way, the way he plays in terms of the physicality, getting in there, creating opportunities for the defense. We already talked about what he did against Murray State. He had the 1.5 tackles for loss. He had the forced fumble, and when it comes to CUSA teams that are playing Middle Tennessee, you got this guy, you got Zaylen Wood as well on defense. Middle Tennessee has been able to put together some solid defensive players over the past few years. You might remember Reed Blankenship, guy coming to the Eagles, making an impact immediately. Guy named Kevin Byard as well. So Middle Tennessee is getting better and better when it comes to creating some of these defensive players. And I got to say, I've been pretty impressed with it. And it's going to be interesting to see how Middle's defense will compare to other defenses, because I feel like CUSA, and you guys can correct me on this, but I feel like it's largely an offensive conference. It focuses a lot on the offensive prowess of teams. But Middle Tennessee is, at least they have solid defensive players. Now, obviously, that they gave up 56 to Alabama, which was not ideal. That's not what you want to do. But at the end of the day, they played hard against Missouri, almost beat a Missouri team that, for all rights and purposes, just beat Kansas State. And that's a top 15 or formerly top 15 Kansas State team. So when you put all that into consideration, who knows? Maybe Middle Tennessee has the pieces to get some stuff done. But that's just something else that I've noticed with that. So moving on past that, I will say this, because we've got some interesting games coming up this weekend. What do you guys think? And what do you look at with this schedule and see as an interesting matchup?
I think that, I guess the biggest thing is Liberty and Florida International.
Yeah.
So pretty much the two teams we've highlighted so far early in the show, potential number one teams in CUSA. They got a matchup at 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern. I think that's going to be one to watch. I think another one that might be interesting, obviously, is going to be Colorado State and MTSU, just because I think two teams that are better than their record shows and are kind of given an opportunity to show which one might be a little bit better than the other, especially as we get closer to conference play. Colorado State going to the Mountain West, starting up Conference USA play. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to highlight, for the homer pick there, Middle Tennessee versus Colorado State, because again, Colorado State, again, like we mentioned, coming off that very chaotic, college game day experience down in Boulder, and just interesting to see how they play after that, because I mean, we saw there was a lot of, big media, pounding on Colorado State for their dirty plays, on Travis Hunter and co there in Colorado, but at the end of the day, it's like Colorado's playing. They're going to look to bounce back. They took Colorado to overtime, and at points looked like the better team on the field.
I think they outplayed them.
So yeah, I mean, they played a pretty great game. So I'm not going to say, oh, MTSU is going to walk away with this. This is going to be a game. And if MTSU can keep the offense rolling, they looked pretty good against it's Murray State. So I'm not saying anything too quickly. But again, MTSU has looked pretty poised. Again, they kept it really, really close with Mizzou. I mean, some calls could go our way, penalties. But, that's besides the point. But again,
oh, man.
I mean, for playing two SEC teams as a Conference USA squad, I mean, they gave up less points to Alabama than, Western Kentucky gave up to Ohio State.
That's true.
And so, I mean, their defense has solid, players on it. And so they are going to be able to get stops. They're going to be able to, cause problems on the defensive side of the ball. And it's going to help, with an inexperienced quarterback, in Vadiato, and being able to, get the offense kind of, better field, position and all this. So again, middle just has to play they just can't play afraid. They have to play aggressive. They have to play physical, especially causing trouble in the trenches. If they can cause, pressure, on the quarterback's face and all this, they could cause some problems. But again, they can't play perfect every time. So, but if you're MT, this is a game you want to come off back-to-back wins. Starting 2-2 heading into conference play is way better than going 1-3 and before you get into conference play.
Well, that one was certainly going to be interesting, and one more that I think is going to be really interesting is Louisiana Tech, Nebraska, because I think that there is a potential for an upset here. Now, it all comes down to whether or not Nebraska can get that offense generated, because we saw it on a national stage up against Colorado. Sims in that offense, which they did make a quarterback change. We talked about that pre-show. And that'll be the question, can they use that to their advantage and become a better team and become more well-rounded? But Louisiana Tech, they're a team that I think has impressed me in a way that I didn't think they were going to. They're up to 2-2. They've gotten some solid wins already and have a win in conference. So this could be a big chance for Conference USA to get a Power 5 win, even if it's against one of the lower Power 5 teams. 2:30 on Big Ten Network, so there's going to be a few more eyeballs on that. I think it's a big chance for Louisiana Tech, and maybe one of the bigger wins that they've had in a long time, maybe since the Terry Bradshaw era. If you remember back to that time in the 70s, they said that that guy from Duck Dynasty also played on the team, but that's neither here nor there. Conference USA has a lot of connections, as you can tell. But all of that considered, this is going to be a really fun game. I'm excited to see how Louisiana Tech plays Nebraska. And, I mean, if you're talking score prediction, I think it'll be a bit of a low-scoring game. I mean, it might be a 20-17 matchup, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of directions that one could go. And really, we talked about Liberty FIU, so we're going to have our first conference matchup of the weekend, or of the season, I should say, in terms of this weekend, the only one of this weekend, as far as I can tell. I don't think there's any other teams playing in conference. So that matchup has a lot more, especially you mentioned FIU and Liberty both trying to get to that next level. So that one gets a lot more. Matt touched on Middle Tennessee, Colorado State, 6 p.m. here in Murfreesboro, ESPN Plus. Homecoming in Middle Tennessee, Murfreesboro. So there's going to be a lot of fans, in theory, out there to watch this one, and I think it'll be a good showing. Really, Conference USA has a lot of intriguing matchups, and I think it's only going to get better as the season progresses. But I think that kind of leads into what would you guys say in terms of predictions? Like, if you had to make a choice right now, and I know it's early. We're talking week 3. It's very, very early. But the question I have for you guys is, who do you think walks away with the title this year, if you had to make a choice right now?
It's just, like I said, it's so early. We haven't really seen every team at their peak. like I said, I think if you look at an overall team aspect, who plays better on all three sides of the ball, special teams, defense, and offense, it's probably Liberty. But
I agree with that.
Like I said, it's so tough to tell because they struggled with an offensive identity the first two games. They kind of finally figured something out in their schemes against Buffalo over the weekend. But defensively, they've looked pretty solid. You know, even New Mexico State has had their moments. Like, they have had their opportunities to, be almost undefeated. It's just, turnover prone. That's the biggest thing. New Mexico State has plenty of opportunity to win a conference title.
Just got to get out of their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like I said, very skeptical to say anything about Florida International because they once again have found a rhythm with a freshman quarterback, sophomore running back. Their defense looked pretty good. If it weren't for a few miscues against Louisiana Tech early in the season, they would be undefeated.
Yes.
Like I said, they still have one of the more weaker schedules. But like I said, I put my money on Liberty.
I would say Liberty too. I mean, I'm gonna say they go like 10-2 at the end of the year. I'm very, very high on Liberty right now. I just think that they are the team that every other team would want to be, has the best efficiency, knows how to get the job done. I think WKU is a close second. I was not very impressed, of course, by the performance against Ohio State, but just because again, you're known as an offensive team. They only had 10 points. Austin Reed is supposed to be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. That was a little bit disappointing. Maybe you could chalk that up to Ohio State's defense, but that's besides the point. I think Western Kentucky is going to be a very solid team. I think Middle Tennessee, I think they could be a top 3 team in CUSA if things work out a certain way. Now, they've got to play well, and they've got to execute. And I think that they have to take the lessons that they learned from the Murray State game, from the Missouri game, from the Alabama game, translate that into their next games. But I think if they put all the pieces together, they can become a force in the new CUSA. But, I mean, that could be a hopeful thing. But, Matt, what do you think?
Well, okay, I think a team that we haven't been talking about much that could be a low-key sleeper is Jacksonville State.
Jack State?
I've liked what I've seen so far. Their offense has been a little bit sketchy. They got a little bit of flip-flop at quarterback at times. But from what I've seen, Jacksonville State, again, has played some solid games. Their defense has been holding up pretty well. So another team that could potentially sneak in there, fly under the radar at times. I mean, they're again have one of the best, run or point differentials in the conference. So again, a team that could potentially throw their hat in the ring. Again, 1-0 already in conference play against their win in UTEP in week 0. But again, another team that just I feel like has fallen under the radar. Got a tough loss, to Coastal Carolina, but looking to bounce back. But again, another team that heading into conference play could be very lethal. Jacksonville State.
I like that you mentioned Jack State. I mean, that's a pretty solid team, and they're part of this new wave, right, of CUSA teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I feel like Liberty's obviously going to headline the new teams that come into Conference USA, and I mean, New Mexico State's probably the second one, but again, Jacksonville State, dare I say, could be the best out of the new ones there.
Well,
Ooh.
Their biggest concern is going to be, in their passing game because they do have a solid run game that, takes time off the clock. Defenses are one of the better ones in conference. I would say that what's going to get them into trouble once again, I think, is playing at this level. Like I said, very early. Defense, as you mentioned, has looked great, and they do put a lot of pressure on the ball. They lead the league in sacks.
They do.
Now. So it's going to be a matter of same thing with Sam Houston. Can they find a way to score points? And they can't really rely heavily on the ground because if you're defense, all you got to do is just stack the box.
Yep.
You just put 8 guys in there, and they can't do anything. It's one thing that Jacksonville State's going to have to look at and try to improve upon. But I do like to say that of the 4 newcomers for CUSA, Jacksonville State has certainly looked a little like a dark horse, absolutely.
I think that there's a very solid case to be made for them being a dark horse. I mean, they're a team that has showed their talent time and time again, and we saw what they did in FCS, and I think that speaks to like how all the teams have good FCS history. I mean, New Mexico State has been an independent, or they were in were they in the Sun Belt? They've been in the Sun Belt for like a year, right?
Who's this?
New Mexico State.
Previously, because they were there in the Sun Belt for a little bit, yeah. Yeah.
But like
in Idaho, that was another thing that was a weird team that was in the Sun Belt. Was Idaho's in the Sun Belt at one point.
The Sun Belt's supposed to be okay. You know, we're getting off topic. Anyway,
One time about getting off topic though, Riley Green, the country singer, played quarterback at Jacksonville State. So I just that's an interesting fact.
Gosh.
Yeah. Anyway.
All the CUSA connections, man. I'm telling you, celebrities play. Bradshaw, country singer, the Duck Dynasty guy. I'll remember his name some point. Anyway.
Phil Robertson, by the way.
Phil Robertson. There you go. Shout out to Phil Robertson. If you're watching CUSA All Access, you've made it to the show. So appreciate it. Anyway, where we were talking about
Jacksonville State
Jacksonville
being a dark
State,
horse
yeah.
for the newcomers.
Yeah, we went a little off course there. Anyway, so yeah, Jacksonville State, dark horse. I think they very well could be. Now, I'll also say that if Sam Houston can get the offense figured out, they can be a dark horse as well. I mean, it just comes down to getting the offense in order. Their quarterback,
Keegan Shoemaker.
Yeah, Shoemaker. I was blanking on his name. He's thrown 3 interceptions this season. That's not good. You got to change that. So, I mean, I think if they what?
Yeah, he's matching the points. They're trying to play like matching games.
Matching games?
Yeah, for every points they score, they got to throw the same amount of interceptions.
Like CUSA scoregami.
Yeah, exactly.
Love me some scoregami. No, I think that he's got to figure out the interception, the turnover problem. I mean, you've touched on it a lot in the show. That's a killer. Turnovers create opportunities for your opponents. I know it's cliche, but sometimes the best thing you can do offensively is just to keep the ball in your hands. Don't drop the bread. That's the thing. I mean, whatever you got to do, make sure you secure the ball, keep it in position. But I think Sam Houston can, and they're playing Houston this week, by the way. So that's that confusing matchup there. Sam Houston versus Houston in Houston. Houston cubed, I guess is what we'll call that one. But overall, I think that the new wave is beneficial. I think, in my opinion, I think it's a good thing to have these new teams in. I know there were a lot of people who doubted some of these teams, like New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, Liberty. Like, some of these teams, people may have been like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State were both preseason to pick to finish at the bottom of Conference USA. Once again, that's just transitioning. I don't know if it's necessarily that they were doubting them. I think it's always an expectation that teams coming up are going to struggle early on, adapting to the level of play, scholarships, traveling. It's a whole different situation. Not to give them credit because, like we said, I think Jacksonville State has definitely looked great. Sam Houston State, once again, has looked great on one side of the ball. They just got to figure a way to fix the turnovers. And we got a lot of teams in CUSA that pick the ball off. And like I said, Liberty is one of them. All right, 9 interceptions on the season already and 3 games in. All right, so and they played some really tough teams. It's one of those things that you got to correct. And defensively, that's why Liberty looks like the best team and one of the newcomers that has definitely impressed.
I mean, I think it's hard to argue that they haven't impressed all the way through. Yeah. And, I mean, yeah, they're the team to look out for in Conference USA. I think that it's hard to argue that point. They just have the better overall looking talent roster. And they have a coach that you know a thing or two about, right?
Jamie
Coastal
Chadwell.
Carolina, yeah. Former Coastal Carolina guy right here. So he has connections with that. But interesting weekend in Conference USA. A lot of teams that are going to be making a lot of noise. Another great weekend of Conference USA football. I think that it's not hard to not argue that. But what is something that you guys saw that stood out to you this past weekend in Conference USA sports? Anything that comes to mind that just was different? I mean, we know we all saw the Middle Tennessee game. Is there anything that you think is a bit not being talked about right now? I mean,
well, if we want to get off the topic of football, I mean, just volleyball in general. That season started up. A lot of quality volleyball in CUSA. Western Kentucky has been a dominating force for the longest time. They're ranked in the top 25 in NCAA women's volleyball. MTSU is on an 8-game winning streak right now as they head actually to New Mexico State this weekend. UTEP has looked phenomenal. Another team, actually, once again, Liberty, actually up until this past weekend was undefeated.
Yep.
So they've looked solid.
They're good. They're really good at every sport.
Yeah. No, it's just it's a good athletic university.
It is. Yeah.
Golf, baseball,
they're
basketball,
undefeated in soccer too.
Yeah.
You're not to know.
So I mean, there's just plenty to talk about when it comes to other CUSA sports. If we want to get off the topic of football. But.
I mean, to piggyback off your volleyball, you're talking about MTSU, riding high on an 8-game winning streak. That 8-game winning streak didn't include a ranked 25 Auburn team.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I mean, anytime you can take down a ranked opponent, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, these past 2 seasons for Blue Raider athletics has been taking down ranked opponents. I mean, look back, sorry to beat a dead horse for you, Dylan.
Oh, no.
Miami getting taken down in football. Then you looked at women's.
It's like a year old though. Like
Miami's a new team now. When we just took
A
down
win
Texas
is a win.
A&M.
Next
Off topic, but
next, you had women's basketball taking down Louisville here in the Murphy Center last season as well. And then men's tennis as well, taking down, Northwestern and a bunch of other ranked teams, and they were ranked themselves. Same with, women's basketball being also squeaking into the, top 25 there as well, getting a trip on to the dance. So, I mean, it's been a very high, level of play for Middle Tennessee, athletics across the board. I mean, for all sports, not just football alone, because I know football is like the big money makers, but with the other sports, again, like we've been saying, volleyball has been looking very well. They look like a very solid team so far. But also just, if you're a Blue Raider fan, there's a lot of good sports to look forward to. A lot of good teams that, representing, Middle Tennessee. So, but again, shout out to the volleyball. Again, taking down a ranked opponent is always a good point for them.
I mean, that's huge. And I do want to ask you this question, Matt. Who do you think of the Conference USA teams? I mean, who's going to take on the overall championship crown? I mean, who wins the most championships out of all the sports, all the athletics in CUSA? This is a tough question, but I want to see what you have to say on this one, because I'm curious.
That is a very tough question. And I mean, just looking, I mean, you got to think of it, breaking it down by, teams. I mean, you got to think WKU's in the running for women's volleyball and also football. And then you think MTSU's probably got men's tennis, softball again. They look like a very good team for the softball. So again, the 100 miles of hate, it's taking a couple. Man, that's a really good question. I mean, there's just so many sports you got to take into account.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to make a choice, I guess.
You know what? I'm sticking with my roots. Go Blue. I think MTSU has a very well chance to, if Middle Tennessee can take down their conference opponents in football, they take the football crown. They'll take the tennis crown, I'm pretty sure, in their upcoming season. I think the softball team is also very well constructed as well. So there's, 3 sports. And then again, volleyball could also be if they can ride this momentum high, I think they could,
they could be a force.
They could be a force in that league too. And I mean, the soccer team has been, they've been changing ships after a little, rocky start, especially
making strides.
So again, there's a lot of ifs and, so it's up in the air, but give me True Blue for the crown of the Conference USA.
Well, the man bleeds blue, and I mean, you can't argue with that. So he's going with Middle Tennessee. We'll see how it all plays out, but I think we can all agree that Conference USA, a pretty fun conference to see this year, and I can't wait to see what the future looks like, not just for it, but also for us here on CUSA All Access. And thank you all so much for tuning in this week. Matt over there, Ryan over here, me, Dylan Simmons right here. Thank you all so much for watching our very first episode. Thanks for joining us on this ride. We will see you next time right here from Studio 2 on the campus of Middle Tennessee State University. Thank you all so much, and remember to always have an electric night.